What's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing 2022 predictions for the ACC. There'll be timestamps below if you guys want to skip around. We'll do extensive previews for the top three teams in each division that we predicted, and then we'll do the final standings and cap things off, our conference championship pick, and some awards. So getting things started, Nick, NC State, 12-0. I think this is kind of a bold pick for this football team. That's never really lived up to expectations. They haven't really been terrible, though, when they've had high expectations, but never really sealed the deal here in the conference. Looking at this offense, Devin Leary's back after a phenomenal season. 3,400 yards, 35 touchdowns, only had 5 picks. His accuracy top touch reigns supreme over opponents. Leary doesn't possess great physical tools. He's quite limited to being a pocket passer. I like his velocity and zip, but when he loses mechanics, that kind of flusters. I think this is going to be a big-time year for him to break out. Look at some of his weapons, though. He loses Amika Emezi, gets back Thayer Thomas. He's a slot guy. He's likely going to be used outside, more 6 foot, 197. Devin Carter, been very consistent over the past 3 years, coming off a career season where he had 31 receptions, 551 yards, 6'3", 216. He's a better fit for the ex-receiver. They also had Daryl Jones, though, from Maryland, 300-plus yards last year. Didn't do much before his transfer. I'm looking at a guy like Porter Rooks, though. He's a guy that they want to get on the field. Speaking of Daryl Jones, though, he brings a lot of speed, as does Anthony Smith. Also like what they have at tight end, Trent Penix. He's going to make that full conversion from running back to tight end, 6'3", 236. Christopher Tuttle, 6'4", 240. He had 4 touchdowns, a bigger red zone threat. Nick, how do you feel about this passing attack that has high expectations for this season?
I really like this passing attack headlined by Leary. Super strong quarterback. I love him in the pocket. He's got great pocket presence, great awareness. The turnovers, he's very low in the turnovers last year, 5 interceptions, very impressive number for Leary. Yes, occasionally he does get flustered and kind of rolls out a little bit, might make a big mistake here and there, but I think his pocket presence overall is super strong. He's had a strong offensive line to work with, which I think certainly helps, but these weapons he returns, Carter and Thomas, both very talented, and the transition at tight end, I think that's a solid move for him. This is a solid offense top to bottom. I think Leary's going to be gunslinging it all year. I'm excited to see what type of numbers his team can put up.
Biggest concern, though, is the offensive line. They replace Ike Mukwanu. Both tackle spots are up for grabs, kind of shaky there. But Grant Gibson, one of the nation's top centers, he's back to anchor this unit. Great run blocker. I don't think they'll be as great as they were last year up front, but I don't expect much fall off on that offensive line. Top to bottom, like you said, pretty good offense. They, of course, lose over 90% of the rushing production from last year, so they're obviously going to have some new guys running the football. Everyone has high on this team, though, because they get 10 starters back on a great defense. They're 23rd in FBS against the run. They're 75th for comparison in 2020, despite having a first-team defensive tackle. I love this defensive line. Nick Corey Durden, he's a veteran. Not really a stat sheet warrior, but he is like Agam from a few years ago. He's a guy that frees up things around him. 6'4", 310, 31 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss. I really like what Corey Durden does. Should push for first-team all-conference this year. We also got Savion Jackson. He should continue to ascend. C.J. Clark only had 3 games last year at nose tackle, but they are very excited about him. David Vann as well, versatile player, had 9 QB hurries last year. He's an athletic specimen. And then Joshua Harris, 6'4", 325. He brings plenty of size. Really good defensive line. But, Nick, I'm really excited overall about the front seven because of this linebacking core. Peyton Wilson, he was hurt in the 3rd game of the year. He's back. Isaiah Moore, he was great until he got hurt himself after 7 games. Those two combined for well over 200 tackles in 2020. They didn't get to play the full year last season, but that allowed Drake Thomas to shine into the year with 99 tackles, 3 picks, 13.5 tackles for loss, made a lot of great plays, and coverage was even better against the run. Overall, this front seven is one of the best in college football. How do you feel about it?
This front seven is straight up nasty in all the good ways. This is such a talented front seven. Isaiah Moore's a great linebacker, great leader in the locker room. Corey Durden as well, experienced guy on the defensive line. Tons of leadership qualities there. I love what he can do. Commands that defensive line. Super talented player there. Doesn't really stuff the stat sheet like you said, but I think that he has those intangibles that you want in a defensive lineman. Super talented player and has that perfect attitude for me. I love this front seven. It's ridiculously talented across the board. I think this defense is just so strong, returning 10 starters. This is the team to watch in the ACC in terms of defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to dominate this year.
The secondary has taken major strides in Dave Doran's tenure as well. They're second in FBS in opponent completion rate last year. Good news for them. 100% of the snaps are back in the secondary. We just raved about the front seven, then you hear a number like that. That's insane. CB1 is locked down. Shaheen Battle, he was really good in 2020. Continued to get better last year. I think he'll continue to make more steps this fall. Tyler Baker-Williams, he stepped up last season, gave them a reliable nickel, which was a concern heading into the year. I was pleased with his efforts. And Tanner Engel, first team ACC a year ago, 70 tackles. He could have went to the draft rather. He decided to come back and potentially hunt down a championship with his team. I have him going 12-0, winning the conference and going to the playoffs. Might be a little bold. I think, again, the most important thing, though, to watch is the offensive line and the run game. I think Porter Rooks, David Vann, those two are going to emerge and help out some of the stars they already have on this football team, and I have them winning this conference.
We saw it last year. They beat Clemson last year, first time in a while. They knocked off the Clemson Tigers. This team is super talented top to bottom. I also have them winning the conference and heading to the college football playoff for the first time in the college football playoff era. I think 12-0 is a perfect record for this team. I like the schedule top to bottom. Don't think it's too tricky anywhere particularly. And I think the offense just has so much talent. They're going to put up points on the board every single week. And then you look at the defense, they're going to stop a lot of teams and make it difficult for teams, especially trying to run the ball. That front seven is just ridiculous. Teams are going to struggle to run the ball on them. I think they have a clear pathway to the playoff. I think it's a super talented team top to bottom. I'm excited to see what the Wolfpack can do this year.
They do play at Clemson, who is the runner-up in this division. It wasn't a rebuild last year, just a disappointing year top to bottom. The new staff they put in place, Tony Ellett, Brett Venables are gone. They promote 2 guys from inside. Good move. Brandon Streeter, for example, he's been groomed for this position. Offensive recruiting, Nick, hasn't been as great over the last 3 years. Disagree if you want to, but they aren't stacking up like these other programs. The number I keep harping on is only 5 players in the class of 2022 on offense they landed were ranked. So that's obviously a big concern, at least for here in the short term. Long term, they'll pick it up. DJ Uyunglele, he was brutal last year. The 2 games he had in 2020 were so good, but this past season didn't look like that quarterback one bit. Chemistry, accuracy was not there. In the bowl game, they didn't attempt any deep passing plays because I just didn't have any confidence in him. 9 touchdowns, 10 picks, 176 yards per game. Cade Klubnik, Dabo will not hesitate to start him. The 6th overall recruit, number 1 quarterback, incoming, true freshman. Good in the pocket, some good touch and accuracy, can make any throw. He has confidence. That's something I think they're looking for this year. Looking at the quarterback situation combined with the running game, 168 yards per game on the ground. They only had 3 200-yard games last season on the ground. That's not good, but 2 of them were in a row to end the regular season. Those were impressive efforts. They're looking to build off that. Will Shipley, slice and dice runner. Kobe Pacey's the more physical of the 2. The offensive line was not good. I remember versus Georgia, they couldn't do a thing. I expected them to make plays on the edge. They didn't even attempt to. They were beat up throughout the year. I expect better things from this offensive line. It's a fresh start. Depth was a problem. Some more health. You got Jordan McFadden. He had a great season, though. Will Parks, he was a solid run blocker. Tristan Lee, a former 5-star, might get into the lineup. He's good at tackle. The inside's a big question mark, though. I think Will Putnam, he's probably their best interior lineman we'll see. And the Marcus Tate, a player they like. He's a veteran at 6'5", 325. And then before I get your thoughts on the running game in the QB battle, I want to discuss some of the weapons they have. Joseph Nagata, 6'3", 220. Really like his ability to catch in traffic. He's probably the best playmaker. Justin Ross's former high school teammate, E.J. Williams, he's there with good hands. Also a contested catch guy. And then you got Bo and Dakari Collins expected to step up this year. And then tight end Davis Allen, he's a veteran. He's been around a while. Nothing too extraordinary, Nick, here in terms of weapons. And that's why I keep focusing on the lack of recruiting at the skill positions, because they don't have a lot of depth. Some of these guys, I think the players I just mentioned, are pretty solid, but after that, there's not much.
Tiger fans can pretend that the lack of depth on the offense is not an issue, but it certainly is the recruiting. Dabo may have seemed to have lost his touch a little bit on the offensive recruiting. The numbers are just not as strong as used to be. The guys coming in just don't really live up to the Clemson Tiger expectation. I also think this year is a big, interesting year. Look at the quarterback battle. I had high faith in DJ last year. I thought he was going to be a Heisman favorite. He was my pick for the Heisman in the preseason. I was really impressed by the small sample size. Yes, very small sample size, but the 2 games he played in 2020, I was super impressed, especially the Notre Dame game. He had great pocket presence, really looked like he was in control of that offense in the game that Trevor Lawrence missed. Of course, the BC game as well looked solid in that one. Then he comes out against Georgia and just does not play a good game at all, and then it was all downhill from there. 9 touchdowns and 10 interceptions is a terrible number for a starting quarterback at Clemson. I know Dabo's not going to hesitate to pull the trigger. Klubnik could find himself starting very soon in the season. I know Dabo's not going to hesitate at all. I think we'll see a switch very early on if things do not go the way, but I have full faith in DJ for now. I think he's worked all in the offseason. I think he'll kind of readjust, get back into the swing of things. Will Shipley at running back, solid back. I like the speed he has. Joseph Nagata as well, super talented wide receiver. Love that big playability from him. The offensive line is also solid as well. I just worry about the chemistry in this offense. I don't know how they're going to really work together. I worry that they might find themselves out of line, out of sync a little bit here and throughout the season. It could be definitely a question mark for Clemson.
Now, we just raved about the NC State defense, but this defense is phenomenal. The front 4 is absolutely loaded. The injuries last year allowed guys like Rook Ohoro and Trey Williams to step up. Williams and Tyler Davis are returning senior. They're both 6'2", 300. Brian Brissy, he's back from a torn ACL, 300 pounds, great hands. He's very slim for being 300 pounds. That allows him to move well in space. I love this front 4 they have. That also has KJ Henry, who's never been great. Xavier Thomas, another former 5-star. COVID missed last year, played 7 games in 2020. He's never been great himself outside of his freshman year, but the talent is certainly there. And getting back to, the form he was before he missed the entire 2021 season, I just think that Xavier Thomas is going to be a big year for him to break out his final year on campus. Miles Murphy, though, team high 14 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, fights hard, strong upper body. Recognition versus the run is phenomenal. Overall, Nick, this is a phenomenal defensive front mixed in with some talented linebackers. Of course, there's some new faces in the interior Mixed with Trenton Simpson, a hybrid guy, great pursuit. He had 12 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. His speed really stands out. They blitz him a lot because he can really get there. His ability to stunt, good open field tackler. Trent Simpson, this guy is fun to watch. Those two new linebackers I was talking about, Barrett Carter, Jeremiah Carter, the third-ranked inside linebacker in his class, 4.5 speed. That's pretty good for 6'1", 225. He's right now a better pass rusher than a traditional linebacker, so we'll see how they're using him. And Trotter, he was the 5th-ranked linebacker. And they were in the same class together. Similar qualities, but he's more flexible in coverage with his instincts and physicality. Overall, this is probably the nation's best front seven, if not, it's right there.
Absolutely, definitely up there in terms of front sevens. Murphy and Breeze themselves are just ridiculous on the defensive line. Those guys can get after the quarterback ridiculous amounts this year. I expect a ton of sacks out of the two of them. Should be highlighting strongest defensive linemen in the country. Going to be up there in the ACC awards for sure. These guys are super talented. Simpson, I love the versatility he has. Can play inside, outside linebacker, wherever you need to move him. I think Simpson's super talented top to bottom. I like to see him be involved in a couple different roles this year. I like to see him get some pressure on the quarterback as well this year. This is a solid front seven.
In the secondary, I wasn't a big fan of it last year. I picked them to lose the Pitt solely because of the back end. I felt Nolan Turner was a big liability. He got beat for a score. What do you know? It's not great when you can pinpoint who's going to get beat, and that's what ended up happening. They weren't awful by any means, though. They were the only team in the conference that have more picks than touchdowns allowed. And, truthfully, only times they struggled were against teams you expect them to, like Pitt, Wake Forest, NC State. They weren't getting slashed by poor passing attacks outside of the BC game early on in the year. They do lose 3 starters, though. Sheridan Jones, a senior leader. Dabo's hyped for the year he might have. A lot of veteran presence there. Andrew Macumba breaks on the ball well, 9 pass breakups, tackles in the box very well. Prototypical safety. This is a guy that Brent Venables, he's a typical Brent Venables type of player. He was good for them last year. I think he's a big breakout star this year. Nate Wiggins, he's a pure athlete, a guy that should have no issues in man coverage. Might even find time at safety. They also brought in 2 high-ranked corners, Lucas and Pride. Pride's pretty physical. Lucas, he's very long, 6'2". He's a ball hawk. We might see those guys get on the field. What are your thoughts on the secondary before we move to Wake Forest?
I like Macumba, solid guy. I think he can step up this year and be a leader on this team. I expect him to fly up some draft boards for sure. Super talented safety. I like what he has. Fits that sort of defensive mold that they kind of built at Clemson. Solid guy all around. The secondary's not too bad.
Now looking at the Demon Deacons, 9 starters are back from the 4th-ranked scoring offense last year. That's just phenomenal work. Sam Hartman shattered the single-school records for yards and touchdowns, 4,200-plus and 38 scores. Also ran for 363 yards and 11 touchdowns. He's the career touchdown passing leader. Great command of this offense, understands it very well. Not the biggest arm, but he has some nice velocity. Biggest problem with him, 14 picks last year. That makes 29 interceptions in 36 career games, so I want to see that come down this year. Plenty of experience, though, from Hartman and his receivers. A.T. Perry averaged almost 19 yards per catch last year, just shy of 1,300 yards, found the end zone 15 times. Such a great impact player for them. Makes a big play every time he catches it, it seems. 6'5", 206. Wins at the top of his routes with good movement. Good awareness allows him to win across the middle of the field. I like A.T. Perry. Mix that with guys like Taylor Morton. He's a Hunter Renfro type of guy with his savviness at 5'10", 176. He had 40-plus receptions for 600-plus yards last season. They get Donovan Green back. He had almost 600 yards himself in 2020. He had over 20 yards per catch. Did not play last year due to injury. You throw those guys in with Keyshawn Smith, who was a freshman last season, 4th leading pass catcher who had 400-plus yards and 3 scores. Passing attack was great last year, Nick, and if Hartman can turn on down the turnovers, these guys are going to be tough to outscore.
Right, that's the key to this Demon Deacons offense. If Hartman can keep turnovers limited, you'll kind of have a better opinion, a better process in the pocket, make less mistakes like that, focus on his targets. This team can fly up the scoring charts. I mean, this receiving core is ridiculous. Perry and Green are super talented. I'd like to see them continue to light up the scoreboard. Hartman's is a great arm. I love what he can do. Super talented quarterback, but just the turnovers we worry about. We've been discussing that this offseason. It's very clear to see that the turnovers are an issue for Hartman. In general, those super talented quarterback. I love what he can do. Super talented top to bottom. I think this offense is really strong.
They also have 4 starters back on the offensive line. They lose Zach Tom to the NFL. They also lose Christian Beal-Smith. But they had 3 different runners that had 500-plus yards last year. They had 2 of them back. Justice Ellison, he had 7 touchdowns as well. And Christian Turner, he had 5 scores on top of 506 yards. So they got a nice little backfield here. Biggest concern, though, was this run defense. They get 6 starters back on a unit that certainly progressed, especially on the D-line. They were still 111th versus the run, though, Nick. They got into the backfield for 97 tackles for loss. The edge presence was good. The interior D-line and positioning from linebackers were not as strong, though. Rondell Bothroyd, 16.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. He was a consistent force for them. Jasheen Davis, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5-plus sacks. They solidified an impressive edge duo. Ja'Cory Johns also provides some nice depth. Deion Bargan, he's a vet that made some good plays for them. They pick up Kobe Turner from Richmond. I think this run defense can certainly take some strides. I really want to see how defensive tackle performs this year. To lose Luke Masterson. Linebacker depth is a big concern. Ryan Smenda, who had 83 stops last year, is back. Chase Jones as well. They're expecting him to take on a bigger role this year. I don't know. I think the run defense can take strides, but depth in the middle is certainly a concern. And the interior D line, there's nothing that implies immediate improvement. So, what are your thoughts on this front seven?
I think he's a solid guy. 83 total tackles last year. Like you said, he can definitely step up, get some more this year. Bothroyd also solid defensive line. I think he's got in line for a big year. Sack total should go up with him. I like this defense. It's definitely not the greatest in the world, but I think it's strong top to bottom. It has some potential here to make some big plays.
Now, Wake Forest, they've always seemed to have talented players in the secondary. Ball hawking group, always at the top of the conference in picks, it seems. They had 15 last year, ranked 49th against the pass. So they certainly progressed, but allowed over 3K yards. 58% completion rate was fifth on the conference. So some impressive numbers here from the secondary. They still had their moments of disappointment, though, and I think they're in for their best season yet, though. They lose Jasir Taylor. Kalen Carlson's back. 2 picks, 7 pass breakups in 9 games. One of the best corners in the conference when healthy. Nick Anderson, the same can be said about him at safety. Over 100 career tackles through his first 2 seasons. Kobe Davis only played in 4 games last year, but all came in the month of September. He was great. So I think the secondary is going to take some big stride on top of the front 6 or 7 that's solid, but it's not terrible. I think they have some upside. Overall, your thoughts on this defense?
I think it's a solid defense. I like Nick Anderson at safety. I think he's a good leadership. I like the role he provides. Solid safety. This is a good defense. I think they'll be right where they were last year. Similar numbers from this defense. This is a solid Wake Forest team on offense and defense. They should be definitely contending in the ACC.
Looking at the Pittsburgh Panthers, I have this team at 11-1. I didn't really like that, but the schedule seemed quite favorable. They host Tennessee. The ACC games are not as tough, and they return a lot of starters. That's one thing that's really underrated about this team. And then the guys they lose, Jordan Addison and Keaton Slovis replaces Kenny Pickett, rather. So the guys they lose, they replace them with some talented players. I predicted him to Pitt the day Lincoln Riley was hired. Perfect replacement for Pickett. His girlfriend also goes here, so it seemed like a perfect fit from the start. Never really developed under Graham Harrell. I think he'll really shine with Frank Signetti, who's the new offensive coordinator replacing Mark Whipple, longtime quarterback coach. Slovis, he's shown great touch, accuracy, vision. Not always consistent in those categories, though. It doesn't have the strongest of arms, so I think he's going to take some big strides this year. Nice little backfield, too. Israel, plenty of agility and speed for being 215 pounds. Had a kick return touchdown as well on only a few attempts. Also caught 24 balls on top of 650 yards rushing and 7 scores. So he does a lot for them. He was one of 3 backs who had 500-plus yards. It seems like Vincent Davis has been around forever. Him and Rodney Hampton are both 175 pounds each. 150 yards per game, a good mark considering how much they aired it out for this running game, so I don't expect much fall off in that area. It is kind of a depleted wide receiver group, though. Nick Addison, of course, he bails late. Tazir Mack is gone. Lucas Kroll graduates. You have Marshmallow, though, 6'4", 260, a little shorter than Lucas, but was still very productive for a number 2 tight end. I expect him to be a big breakout star for them this season. Jared Wayne, he's also been around a long time. 47 receptions, 658 yards, 6'3", 210. He should be in for a big year. So I think they got some reliable pass catchers here. They did add 2 transfers, one from Akron as well. They didn't, they're a little promising, but nothing to get too excited about. Get all 5 starters back on the O-line, a unit that was not great for them last year. Pickett found himself on the run a lot. Marcus Minor's a guy like 6'4", 325. This offense should fall off, but it should still stay around 35 points per game. They had 41 last year, so I think 35 is very reasonable and would be very impressive considering the talent they lost.
I like Slovis. I think it's a good fit for him out of the portal. Seemed to be a solid fit as soon as Lincoln Riley announced that he was going to USC. This works a lot for me. I think Jared Wayne's a really good wide receiver. Expect him to target him very much early on. Bartholomew as well, super tight end. Bit smaller, but I think he has potential to make a big play this year. This will be in line for a similar season to last year. I do expect a drop-off. It's naturally lose the talent and Pickett Addison. I think this is a super solid team on offense. I like Slovis a whole lot.
The transfer from Akron, Kanta Mumpfield, I did not mention his name, 60-plus receptions, 700-plus yards last year in his freshman season for the Zips. He comes over, looks to give them a spark there, a pass catcher. Look at this defense. This is the biggest reason why I think this team's going to win the division, because they get 7 starters back. The defensive line is phenomenal. 3 of those guys up there had 10-plus tackles for loss last year. His pass rush might be the nation's deepest. Baldonado was great last year. Alexandre had 41 tackles. Dayon Hayes, 8 tackles for loss. John Morgan, he's been around a couple years. He had 11 QB hurries and 5.5 sacks. And then you look at the interior, Kawaja Kansi, 6', 275. David Green, 290 pounds. Not very tall or big on the interior D line, but they had plenty of skill. The tallest guys on the 2 deep was 6'2", and the biggest was only 300 pounds. That was only one of them. So they're not big or tall, but Kansi, 13 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. Pitt for years has lived in the backfield. They were first in tackles for loss in 2020, 3rd last year. Should be top 5 once again this year, especially with the return of Servassier Dennis. He broke out in 2020, 14.5 tackles for loss. Had another 10 this past year. Also had a team-high 87 tackles. Great burst, quite explosive for being 230, nice flexibility. They loses 3 of his counterparts though at linebacker. This is kind of a concern, but they do add 2 transfers. Shane Simon from Notre Dame being one of them. I love this front. Well, I wouldn't say I love this front 7 because of the losses at linebacker, but I do love the D line. I think these guys are really lead the way like they typically do here at Pitt.
This is a good front 7. Double-digit tackle loss this year. Super talented guy. Love what he can get after in the as well. Super strong defensive end. I definitely work the size a little bit on the defensive line, but I can't see he's a super talented player top to bottom. He should pressure the quarter a whole lot. This is a good front 7. I'm not totally in love with it, but I think it has enough to produce this year.
Uncharacteristically bad secondary last year. We never see that under Pat Narduzzi. You've seen that week 2 against Tennessee where guys were just wide open on every play. Joe Milton has no touch or they would have been in trouble. They did lose to Western Michigan's skilled passing tech the next week, though. Tyler Van Dyke, Peyton Thorne, 2 freshmen also tore them apart. These guys were just not good, Nick. 114th in pass defense, allowed 26 touchdowns. They did snag 16 picks. Playmaking is never lacking on this defense. The loss of DeMar Hamlin and Paris Ford at safety, they'll prove to be fatal for this defense. I'm looking for them to bounce back. The 150 10-plus yard pass plays was 128th in FBS. They were not good underneath. A little better deep, but not really because, again, they were still giving up a lot of guys downfield. Just don't see that on the stat sheet. Damari Mathis, the lone departure, he gets drafted, but Eric Hallett, he was really good. 72 tackles, 9 pass breakups, 3 picks. Brandon Hill at safety, I'm really looking for him to step out this year. He had 79 stops and 8 plays on the ball of his own. And A.J. Woods, 7 pass breakups himself. I just keep reading numbers that really stand out to you. No ads in the portal, so Pat Narduzzi, he has a lot of faith in this group, I believe. Playmaking is evident. Rotating, communicating, not so much. I think the secondary is going to break out big time this year, Nick.
Need to see a lot more from the secondary this year, which is absolutely disappointing. Last year's game is a perfect example of what a bad secondary can do. If they just had a quarterback who could make some plays there, they would have been in trouble against Tennessee on that day. Brandon Hill will step up. I think he's a super solid safety. I like him in the secondary. I like how they return these guys. They didn't attack the portal. They kept this team sort of the similar. They really trust the development here. They trust the potential guys have. I think this secondary should develop over time. I'm definitely shaky on them right now, but I think potential to develop throughout the season.
11-1 might be a stretch, but I do think this team will win the division. But they'll have to beat Miami, who they've really struggled with the last couple of years. I think they've lost 5 in a row. It is Miami 9-3, the pick for me. In Mario Cristobal's first season, he also brings Kevin Steele, the coach of the defense, and Josh Gaddis, the Boyles Award winner from last year. Some went down at Michigan and led to his departure. Cristobal and the Canes are glad to have him, though. De'Aaron King, the experiment didn't exactly pan out like we expected, but it led to the emergence of Tyler Van Dyke. He's just scratching the surface of how good he can be. Saved the season last year, it felt like. His great touch, nice velocity. A former pitcher, you definitely see that when he throws the ball. Big plays were not hard to find with him at the helm. 2,900 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 6 picks. And Van Dyke last year, Nick, who gets back a pretty solid group of pass catchers. They're all young, though. They lose the top 2 from last year. It's mainly a mix of vets and young guys here at pass catcher. Keyshawn Smith, he has elite speed, thrives with screens or deep patterns. Xavier Restapro, likely to start in the slot. He's roommates with Dyke, so there's some chemistry there. And Will Mallory, 6'5", 245 at tight end, 30 grabs for 350 yards almost last year. And then, adding on to that, a vertical threat in Frank Ladson from Clemson. Miami has had some good wide receiver transfers last few years. He might be the next one.
I like Tyler Van Dyke. I'm excited to see what he can do this year. Had a good year last year, kind of was thrust into this early on. Really sort of, when his completion percentage got better throughout the season, he had a better touch with it. Solid stats, top the board, only 6 interceptions last year, 25 total touchdowns for him. I'm super excited to see what he can do. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC. Perfect leader for this Miami Hurricanes offense as they kind of transition under Mario Cristobal. I'm excited to see what he can do with this arm. Solid quarterback, top to bottom. I'm excited to see what the talent can produce.
Return of Zion Nelson at tackle is huge for this O-line. They weren't great a season ago. Nelson, his athletic ability really allows him to climb. Great footwork, allows him to shine at pass protection. He's probably going to be a first-rounder next year. And he returns to be with a great group of coaches, Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal. These guys can really coach the O-line. I'm very excited for Nelson this season. Should contend for first-team All-American honors nationwide. Jakari Clark, plenty of experience at center. Jalen Rivers, impactful inside. Only played a handful of games last year. They brought in 2 transfers from Oregon, Logan Sagapuo and Jonathan Dennis. And then right tackle Michael McLaughlin. He's a mover that should fit into some zone schemes here. They pick up Henry Parrish from Ole Miss. He should play a good bit. Follows his running back coach, Kevin Smith. He's speedy. Got him on the edge a lot. He's a slasher that can work on the inside. Chaney, he struggled with health, but he's there. Thad Franklin as well. Jalen Knighton, though, should be the starter, the headline. Strong group of backs, Nick. They were banged up last year, and, only one guy had double-figure games, and that was Cody Brown, who just transferred to Virginia. Knighton, 561 yards, 8 touchdowns, dual-threat guy out of the backfield. Cristobal's going to want to pound the rock with this group. He's got deep backs, solid offensive line. How do you expect that group to progress?
I like this running back core. I think he has a ton of different options here. He can kind of change it up, build different schemes. I like what all these guys provide for Cristobal. I think it's a super diverse running back core. A lot of cool options here for this team. I think they can take definitely a huge step forward in the running game this year.
The pass rushing group for Miami was quite underwhelming in 2021. Only 33 sacks. The D-line, pretty strong group, though, altogether. Mitchell Agudi comes over from UCLA. Strong hands, quick feet, relentless pursuit. I like him. Pair up with Jafari Harvey and Chantez Williams. Williams, 6'4", 255, plenty of length, though. He's an impressive raw prospect, but kind of like Harvey, he's been uninspiring in the first 2 years. So this new coaching staff's certainly going to look to pull something out of him. Cyrus Moss, Najee Kelly, 2 top-end freshmen. They joined Leonard Taylor, former 5-star, 9.5 tackles for loss last year, and Niket Mesidor, West Virginia transfer. He's been a very good interior pass rush, so this D-line should take some big steps. They also got Antonio Moultrie, 4-year vet from UAB, Jacob Litchinson from USC. So these guys are definitely, Cristobal's putting a big emphasis on improving this pass rushing group. Linebacker is probably the weakest part of this team. They added another vet from UCLA and Caleb Johnson. Corey Flagg is here, 3rd season, 60 tackles, 7 tackles for loss. Not exactly a great athlete, though, and his ceiling seems not be very high. They do lose 2 transfers, but Gilbert Frierson, he's been around a long time, a versatile player. Interesting to see what his role will be this year. Overall, what are your thoughts on that D-line? And then, linebacker is kind of concerning.
A little concerned about the front 7, top to bottom. I think Harvey's a solid guy. I like to see him get after the quarterback a lot this year. Gande as well, good pickup for there. Frierson's not a terrible linebacker. I like his leadership, solid guy. From all things considered, 7 tackles for loss last year. I like to see him improve that a little bit this year. Super talented team. I just think it's raw talent, and I really think that to see more out of them, to be comfortable with this, I have high expectations for this front 7, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to meet those expectations. Cristobal certainly will coach them up, but it's interesting to see how they develop throughout the season.
Now, the secondary struggled immensely themselves, 102nd in pass defense. Tyreek Stevenson, though, he was phenomenal in coverage, was left on an island often. He delivered. Interesting battle at safety. Cameron Kitchens, he stepped up as a true freshman, but so did Avante Williams and James Williams. James, very excited for him. He was one of those young players that brought energy late in the year. 31 tackles, 2 picks. Avante, a hard hitter, saw significant action in the Final Four. All 18 stops of his came in November. Also got Darryl Porter, West Virginia transfer, and DJ Ivey. Those guys will battle for CB2.
I like Stevenson. I like Porter coming in as a trend. He's a solid guy. I like to see a lot of him. Stevenson, super strong lockdown corner. I like to see what he can do this year. Left on the island a lot last year, but he still showed out. Stevenson's a super talented guy. Like to see him be the leader this year for this cornerback group. This is a solid. I just get a little concerned at times about the production they return. I think this step up this year, but I have to see it to believe it.
Looking at North Carolina, 7-5, 4-4 is a prediction for me. They lose Sam Howell. They replace him with Jacoby Criswell or Drake May. These guys are pretty similar to Powell in terms of skill and stature. May, he's much taller at 6'5", on top of a 210-pound frame. Seems to play with more confidence in the pocket than Criswell does. He's strong, accurate, nice arm, allows him to rip at all 3 levels of the field. May has enough mobility to make plays when things break down. Criswell, he has an extra year in Phil Longo's system, so he's going to be the starter for me early on in the year. Nearly identical stature to that of Howell, 6', 220. Criswell showcased some nice touch during the spring game, and considering the Tar Heels called plenty of design QB runs last year, seems to be the better fit. Again, Criswell, I think he'll be the starter here. Ty Chandler departs after a really good 1-year stint. Running back British Brooks, though, averaged 9.5 yards per carry last year. That's pretty insane. That'll obviously come down, but he obviously is a pretty explosive back. Him and DJ Jones and Elijah Green, they're all 200-plus pounds, so we'll see what they do with this backfield. I knew Josh Downs last year was going to be the next man up, but I didn't expect 101 receptions for 1,300 yards and 8 scores. That was unexpected. He's dynamic in the slot. Very good playmaker for them from day one last year. Outside of Antonio Green, who had 31 grabs for 612 yards, no one really helped out this passing game. Coffrey Brown was a big disappointment. He with Emery Simmons. Justin Olsen, J.J. Jones, both 6'2", 200. Not much returning production from this wide receiver group. It was pretty underwhelming last year, even though Kamari Morales at tight end, 6'2", 245, had some solid production, 220 yards and 5 scores. They love to get him down the seam. Biggest reason they called all these QB runs, Nick, was because the offensive line was a big struggle area. Flat out got worse. 128 in sacks allowed. Howell had 182 carries. That was tied with Ty Chandler for the team high. So they obviously called that a lot because they had to. And it definitely helped offset this poor effort from the O-line because they really got things going on the ground late in the year. The best offensive lineman, Jordan Tucker's gone. Both guards got drafted. That's not good news. You just heard the stat I read. They lose 3 guys. They're NFL guys, too, which are going to be harder to replace. Spencer Rowland from Harvard. Corey Gaynor comes back from injury. Those are some guys I'm looking at. Looks like 4 seniors and a junior on the offensive line. So experience is a plus. They need to be much better. Top to bottom, what are your thoughts on this offense that is certainly not going to look how it did a couple years ago?
The offensive line really concerns me. I like to see these guys sort of gel together and hope forward because they've been poor last year. British books love what he can do. 9.5 yards per carry is ridiculous, of course. That's a bit skewed, but I think he should still have a lot of yards per carry this year. Downs, super talented. Love his production. Great in the slot. Super talented wide receiver. Green, talented wide receiver. Like to see him get the early. I think that they go with either quarterback, May, or although they'll be set here. I think both are super talented. I'm excited for this offense. I like to see them improve. As long as that offensive line improves, this offense could be in season.
The defense was also a massive disappointment for UNC. Expected big things for them, and they also got worse. They bring back Gene Chizik, though. Same issue back in 2014, where they had a lot of talent, but no energy or organization. That's where he's going to come in and try to reorganize things. 5-star Travis Shaw joins the D-line, 98th ranked run defense. Shaw, 6'6", 320, much more athletic than his size suggests. Versatile in the D-line, good power as well. Miles Murphy, he stepped up in year 2 with 38 tackles and 9 tackles for loss. He should continue to develop. Noah Taylor all around gives these guys some solid weapons on the D-line. Comes over from Virginia. Been pretty productive in a stand-up role. How he performed with his hand in the dirt remains to be seen. 28 tackles for loss, 13.5 sacks in 3 years like that. Tamari Fox, he got suspended. His brother Taman departs. That's obviously not good, but they do have some solid interior pass rushers in Hester and Voshek, both 300 pounds. So overall, I like the D-line. Well, the linebacker, though, Cedric Gray had a team-high 100 tackles. One of the pleasant surprises for them last year. 2 picks as well. He took over Eugene Asante's spot. We expected him to step up. He didn't. Gray did instead. Power Eccles, he got on the field a good bit late in the year. Depth isn't great, so that's why I think Sebastian Cheeks, a freshman, might get on the field. He's an athletic linebacker. Doesn't exactly fit the scheme, a 3-4 in high school, but we'll see how they use him. And then the secondary, Nick, very underachieving. They didn't get better like we expected. They allowed 10 more touchdowns in 1 more game compared to 2020. Good individual players like Tony Grimes and Storm Duck. They were both quite average in 2021, though. Duck was banged up, only played 6 games. I like how they get back Cameron Kelly, 69 tackles, 4 picks last year. One of the things I said just a few minutes ago, Gene Chizik, he came and provided immediate impact. In his first year, they had more picks than touchdowns allowed and ranked top 20 after a tremendously bad year in 2014 against the pass. So obviously he's expected to come in here and apply big changes all over the defense.
Right, Gene Chizik leaves the booth and comes back to coaching ranks. He comes back to North Carolina, team he coached at in the past. He leaves SEC Network, takes this role. I think Chizik's a great hire. I like solid coach, of course, won a national championship at Auburn. Has the resume to show, defensive-minded head coach. I like what he has with some of the talent. I think Tony Grimes, super talented. Cedric Gray as well. Last year, solid number for him. I think Gray will continue to develop. He can eat 100 tackles again this year. I like Chizik here. I think the benefit in the secondary will be great this year. Tony Grimes expect a huge year. And Miles Murphy, also super talented. I'd like to see him improve this year. I think good hire for Chizik. I think this Tar Heels defense will be solid this year.
Looking at the final standing predictions and some of the other teams we didn't discuss, Louisville, great offense. Blake Cunningham adds Tyon Evans, Marshawn Ford, Caleb Chandler at guard. The explosive nature of this offense, I think, is going to allow them to score a lot of points. That's mainly why I have them at 8 wins. The defense is very iffy. I like the experience at linebacker in the secondary, but very concerned by the D-line. I think that they're going to win with time of possession and being able to convert on 3rd down more so to help, alleviate the pressure off this D-line that has a lack of depth. Linebacker Monty Montgomery, Yazir Abdul, he's a great pass rusher, top end playmaker for them. Mohamed Sanago. They also picked up Jermaine Loyal, though. That's a good add from Arizona State to help him out. I like Etrell Clark at corner. I think Louisville's a pretty solid team this year. That's a team you're really high on. Florida State, I hope to see Jordan Travis and Treshaun Ward on the edge with that speed option. Ward, very speedy, very good in the short area. I like how his feet moves. Overall, just a very good running back. I think is really going to emerge this year. Mike Norvell seems comfortable at wide receiver, Nick. Johnny Wilson, or Ontario Wilson, rather, and Keyshawn Hilton are veterans, but they do pick up Johnny Wilson, Winston Wright, Micah Pittman. 3 transfers. They're pretty solid from other Power 5 schools. Looking at the offensive line, I think Robert Scott, Bless Harris, a tackle. Very interested to see how they played this year. And then the defense, they put big strides last year. Jared Verse comes over from Albany. Keir Thomas, Robert Cooper on the D-line. They picked up Tatum Bethune. He had 100-plus tackles from UCF. Dylan Lundby, he was very good against the run. Akeem Dent and Sam McCall, very talented guys, joined by Jamie Robinson, who was a stat sheet stuffer last year. Before I let you talk, I want to discuss Boston College and Syracuse. 16.4 points per game in ACC play for Boston College. That not having Phil Dracovic really hurt them. He's back this year. Christian Mahogany, he was the only notable returner on the O-line. He's now out for the year. Nice trio of Dracovic, Pat Garwo, and Zay Flowers. Jaden Gill is a solid wide receiver as well. Not very hopeful for the defensive trenches, though, and not great athleticism at linebacker either. They do return their top 2 tacklers. very high on the second year a year ago, and they delivered top 5 in numerous categories. Josh DeBerry, Jaden Woodby, Elijah Jones has some good potential. Team just doesn't have the same mold from last year, Nick. Their offensive line pretty banged up. And then, of course, the only guy that returned was really good, too. Syracuse is one of those teams we like, but 3 wins seems to be it because the schedule's tough. They got some nice players on defense like Garrett Williams and Michael Jones. I think Garrett Schrader and Sean Tucker are going to dominate once again on the ground. They also have some nice size on the interior offensive line. The defensive line, not so much. So 3-9 for Syracuse. And then, how do you feel about the rest of this division?
By and large, I agree with you in terms of my prediction across the division. A couple of shuffling. One loss picked up, one win picked up. I have Florida State at 5-7. I just think that there's a little trickier schedule. 6-6. I can't find that 6th win for the Florida State Seminoles. Syracuse, well, I have them at 2-10. I love Syracuse top to bottom. I think they have a really solid roster. I just think that it's behind the power in the ACC, and they'll find themselves struggling and really struggling to keep up with some of these teams. I love Louisville coming in, super talented quarterback. A lot of potential there at Louisville. Super strong roster, underrated roster. People aren't really talking a whole lot about. Boston College as well. I think they have a little bit more steam than some people expect. Jerkovich coming back, super talented quarterback. Like to see his arm this year. See what the potential I can get out of him.
Virginia Tech, I expect big things out of Brent Pry this year. I think that front seven's really going to get unleashed. Dax Holyfield leads them. Some nice players on the interior defensive line there. Nice secondary. Dorian Strong, Shamari Connor. So I think that defense is pretty solid. They couldn't really get a lot out of Justin Hamilton. He really disappointed in that role. Offensively, they had Grant Williams. Jaden Blue comes over from Temple. Malachi Thomas was a pleasant surprise last year. Keon Smith, the wide receiver, has some nice speed. So I think Virginia Tech, that's going to be a more underrated team this year in the conference. No one's going to talk about one bit, especially after they got destroyed in the bowl game. Virginia, 7-5 for me, but this team could definitely compete for the conference just because of how good this offense is. They had Tony Elliott, mixing of guys like Keaton Thompson, Dontavian Wicks, Stash Sheet Stuffers last year, receiver, and then Brennan Armstrong, who literally broke every single school record last year as a passer. So for Virginia, 7 wins for me because the defense is just lacking tremendously. They lose a lot of starters. Nick Jackson's back, but overall, the secondary is pretty disappointing. Front 7, we'll see what they get their production from. And then not much to say about Georgia Tech and Duke. Jeff Collins will probably be fired at year's end. And then Mike Elko takes over at Duke for his first year. How do you feel about this division?
Again, across the board, I kind of agree with you. Some teams get some more wins. I think both Virginia schools pick them an extra win. I see them at 8 this year. I do just love the offense of Virginia. Brennan Armstrong, ridiculous talent, broke all those records last year. He's going to be in line for another super strong season. I think Tech's defense is definitely underrated. People are really sleeping on that defense, top to bottom. I think Miami will also. I think 9-3 is a bit of a stretch for me in the first season. Mario Christmas season 4 was more realistic. Pitt for me winning this as well, though. I think they have a strong roster top to bottom. I expect a whole lot out of Pitt this year, considering what they replaced with the talent they got in the portal. They got the work done. This is an interesting division, but Pitt should easily win it.
Looking at the conference title predictions and some awards, me and Nick both have NC State over Pittsburgh, with NC State advancing to the College Football Playoff. Offensive Player of the Year for me, Malik Cunningham. I like to have some fun here. I think this is a guy that's really going to impress. 20-plus rushing touchdowns last year. He's going to do a lot for this offense. It's his 3rd or 4th year by now. He really understands the system. I think he's really going to I think he's really going to light up stat sheets, kind of like Brennan Armstrong did last year. Defensive Player of the Year for me, Trenton Simpson. Well, you have another Clemson player as well. I think Simpson, with his speed and the way they like to use him, he's going to be big for them this year. We both have Kenny Pickett's replacement, Keaton Slovis, taking over the award for Newcomer of the Year. I think he's going to do great with Frank Signetti this fall. We both, again, agree with Dave Doran getting Coach of the Year. Breakout star, you have Treshaun Ward, who I really like as well, but I think Drake May or Jacoby Criswell and Phil Longo's system are going to – they're just too good of fits not to be the breakout star, so I expect all of them to do so. Before we talk about our sleeper team, how do you feel about your award selections?
Yeah, I like Treshaun Ward as my breakout star. The pick that I feel the most – his speed out of the backfield. I like to see him be involved early on. I think that offense can be built around him potentially this year. I love Florida State offense potential. Treshaun Ward, such a sick coming in there. I love to see what he can do. Brennan Armstrong as well. Had a year last year, lit up the scoreboard, broke his records. I expect a similar year for him. I think he has to be the offensive player. Brian Brise. We talked about this Clemson defense. We raved about it. Someone from that Clemson defense is going to have to win Defensive Player of the Year. I just think Brise is going to get some more sacks and a lot more tackles this year. He's going to be there for me, but across the board, I think Blake Cumming is a super talented pick considering my sleeper team. We're going to talk about 1 second.
Yeah, Boston College for me, just because, I really like Virginia Tech and maybe UNC as well. Maybe even Forrest State. There's a lot of sleeper teams in this conference, I'd say, but I think Boston College, mainly because Jerkovich was missed so much last year, and again, they have a solid trio on offense of him, Garwo, and Flowers. Those guys can really click. They're really a sleeper team because the offensive line, no one's really high on them because they lose so many guys. sucks last year that we're not healthy to be able to utilize those guys to full strength. And the secondary was phenomenal. They might get even better. We'll see what happens in the front seven, because obviously that's an area of concern. Boston College, this is a team that can rip off some wins that people aren't expecting. And you have the Cardinal. 8-4 was my pick. I wasn't really beaten on the table for that. Why are you so high in Louisville?
Mike Cunningham is such a talented quarterback who has so much potential to do what he can do. I also think that people are sleeping on his weapons. I think he has some solid weapons. I know they lost Tyler Harrell in the transfer portal, but I think that is a decent wide receiving core. Also, I think that Cunningham's talent as a running back and a quarterback potential there is just so strong for him. You picked him as an offensive. I think he's going to clearly lead this Cardinal offense. I think people aren't really talking about this team. I think 8-4 is a great record that you and I both predicted for them. But they can make some noises here in the ACC. If things go wrong for NC State or Clemson early on, Louisville can pounce on that for sure. This is a super talented team. I expect big things out of the Cardinal this year.
It's going to be it for today's episode, guys. As always, Nick, thank you for doing this. It was a blast.
Forward to a great year in the ACC, and hopefully NC State can live up to the expectations you and I both have for them.
I agree with that there. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Tell us how you feel about these predictions. See you next time.